so I can see a bit as well. Thank you for coming along tonight. It's a real pleasure to join you guys. Thanks to Sarah and Gregor for inviting me. I think this is the second time I've been up here, because I've got deja vu about this building, this floor, but I'm sure it was at the front somewhere. So today I want to talk a little bit about AI and Azure Integration services, and I think the reason this is important is because people are really struggling with what, there's all this AI tech floating around. What can I actually do with it that's going to be meaningful for my company? And I think people are, really good at using ChatGPT. We all, rip off our blog posts off ChatGPT these days and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the business, we need to solve business problems. And that's the bit I think people are struggling with, is not just how do I create a solution to solve a problem, but also how do I just get started learning the technology in that context. And that's what I'm hoping I can really talk about today. Now, I recognise a few people here, so it's good to see you all again. But if you haven't met me before, so I'm Mike, I'm from Newcastle. So I had a nice little drive up last night in all that wind. And Sarah's just telling me there about all the trucks falling over. I've got a long-term background with Azure, so I've been a Microsoft MVP for 17 years. Historically, I come from an integration background, so I've spent many years connecting systems and making integration solutions. A lot of that time in the Azure space as well, so I've played lots of different roles about tech leads and architecture leads and delivery leads and stuff. But more recently, I've also got quite involved in the FinOps community, so I actually work as the product owner for a product called Turbo 360, which is actually a FinOps product, and they do other stuff with Azure as well. I also love golf, so me and Gregor have got a bit of a golf thing, but if anybody else plays golf and likes to talk about golf, I'm your man. Okay, so I think this is a good picture for me that represents how people feel today about Azure. There's so much stuff, you don't really know where to get started. And for me as an integration guy, what's interesting is all these tech at the tops, the things that all the people in my community have been trying to get their head around for a while. And then in the summer, Microsoft came and dropped a whole load of new tech for integration guys to think about, which is this little bit down at the bottom. And it's like every event, there's more things we've got to figure out. And that whole, where do we use which technology is such a difficult problem. And for me, it's something I quite enjoy because I like sort of thinking about, I've got these two techs that sound very similar, but if I solve a problem with one, there's different things to think about than if I solve it with another tech. So I do a lot of community speaking, I do a lot of YouTubing and stuff about those kind of questions. So if you like my talk today, kind of check out my YouTube and you'll see more of that kind of discussion. Now, when it comes to AI, so why is integration important? Well, to build an AI solution, the intelligence usually needs data, and the data usually needs to be integrated from somewhere to be able to give the AI the power you really need. So that's really why integration is important. And what I want to talk about today is in Azure Integration Services, which is, a lot of these technologies at the top there kind of fall in that space, particularly things like logic apps, APIs, service buses, and that kind of thing. Those technologies can really help you level up the AI investments you're trying to make. And what I want to show is that actually, if you want to go from zero to hero, you can actually do some stuff really quickly, really cheaply, that can actually be quite impactful. And what I'm hoping is everybody who goes away today will hopefully go away with maybe one of two things. So one, I've never tried the AI and I don't know how to get started. Hopefully one of these demos will really help you with that. Or you may have been dabbling with AI a bit and struggling to think about how do I adapt it to the business. And maybe the logic apps solutions we'll talk about today can probably give you some ideas. Me and Stephen were talking about this before. So I think hopefully he'll see some good stuff later on. Now, when we see AI, a diagram like this is what we often get shown at an architecture level. We've got our messaging and our prompts coming in. We've got the LLM. We've got some outputs. We've got some tools. And the tools and actions piece, I think, is really interesting because this is where we give capability to the to the LLM. So if we're giving it just raw data, it's got knowledge, but actions and tools let it do stuff. And this is where Azure Integration Service can really kind of light things up. Now, when you see a diagram like this, for me, it's good to understand the context, but it doesn't really mean anything to me. We need to see things in action, which is what I want to show you today. So we're probably going to work through about 5 use cases, and hopefully that'll really kind of make things come together for everybody. So the first one we're going to do is application modernization. So we've all got legacy apps, and you might want to see what can we do to AI empower this app. So we can't rebuild the entire app, but if the app can call APIs, we can potentially add AI to it, and that's what we're really going to talk about here. So what I try to do is think of some old app, been around for years, the most unlikely legacy modernization you could think of. So we're going to take a 10-year-old plus version of Minecraft, Java edition, so it's not even the new edition, and we're going to see if we can AI empower this to do something cool. So what I'm going to do is over here in my Azure portal. It's the first thing in my Azure portal. I'm in the wrong resource group, so here we are. So what I've done is I've built an API here in Azure API Management that I'm going to call from inside Minecraft that we'll look at in a minute. And what that's going to do is it's going to add as a proxy to some logic apps here. So I think if I remember right, we're probably going to use this one here, I think. And this demo over the last sort of months that I've got this, it's got a bit more complicated because I've put different models in it. Because I did a video once where I said which model can build the best house in Minecraft for me, and I compared DeepSeek and ChatGPT and stuff like that. But what we're going to look at, I'll just kind of give you a view of what this looks like in Minecraft first, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it works. So here, I'm just randomly in the game, wandering around, and I want to build something. Now, if you're in Minecraft, obviously your kids are going to love this one when you go home and you can see we were doing something in Minecraft, but this is kind of a modded version. So I've got something called computer craft in here, and what I can do is I can put a little bot in the game. So we've got this bot called Eddie the Builder. I've got another one called Bob the Builder, but he wandered off earlier, so I don't know where he is. And what we're going to do with Eddie, we're going to do a couple of things. So the first thing is we're going to move out the way while that thing goes past. Points if anyone knows what that's called, by the way. So I'm going to load him up with some tools here. Now, what you might notice is this little bot, he's got this little kind of command prompt kind of thing at the top here, so we can write code in Minecraft, which all of the kids know how to do this inside out. How you would do this, we'll start by doing edit, and I'm going to create a file called X to begin with, and then I'm going to save it and exit. Right, now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go behind the scenes, and I'm going to lift my shirt up like a magician and show you how this bit works. So in Minecraft, basically, it's going to create folders for these different computers, and you can put code in these folders. So actually, if we go back to the game, I should be able to go run a command called ID. Let me demo Gremlins. I'm going to build a new one. Give me a minute. Sorry, bear with me. Right, we'll have a new one. So ID. So he's computer number 11. Right, so right, so behind the scenes now, we should have a folder for computer number 11. Now, what I've got is there's these files are some of the code that I've pre-written for Minecraft to be able to do certain things. And what I need to do is I need to load that code into my computer. So I've got a naughty little PowerShell script that I basically just run, and it copies these files here into the folders so I can execute these commands. So if we go back to the game, what I'll basically do now is I'm going to run a command called wait for command. So this means my little bot's now opened a port and he's waiting to be given a command. So I can listen for him, send a message to him on port 11. Now, I've got a tablet in the game. So if you notice here, I can actually, I can never remember all the commands. So I can actually write commands on my tablet and send them to that computer. So I can do send command, which is one of the bits of code I wrote. And I'm going to send a command to Turtle 11. And we're going to tell them to build something. So anyone got any suggestions on what we should try and build? Sorry, what?
Data center.
The data center. We'll do data center, which could host Azure local, right? So we've sent our command, and if we go back to the bot, and you'll see there's some stuff starting to happen. So the really important bit is this bit here, where we actually called out to Azure from inside the game. And what happens is we'll go and look at the logic app at the minute, but that called my logic app, that called the model, sent my command to the model, and then it downloaded some code back to the bot, and then it goes and dynamically executes it. Now, what happens here can be anything. Now, I'm going to be really honest, it ain't going to build a data center. I've not actually even managed to get it to build a house, if we're really honest, but the code it produces is actually pretty cool. And actually, do you know what? I think we might not have put any blocks in him, did we? Let's do another one. I'm going to do this really quickly, just to... Yeah, I'm pretty sure we forgot to put blocks in him, but do wait for command again. So that's interesting. I think he's on port 11 as well, so we'll see what happens here. So he's got his command, he's calling the API at the minute. And then we'll see what he does. Oh, what's it? Time set. Doesn't look like he wants to play there, does he? So I've had all sorts of things happen with these bots. It's quite funny. One of them got a command and he just ran away. Another one got a command. When I did the ChatGPT versus DeepSeek versus OpenAI, they all built totally different things. One of them actually looked like it might be a house if it had enough bricks, maybe. But you get the point, though. It's off doing stuff. And basically, what's really interesting, actually, though, if you ever watch that video, is the code that got downloaded. I think is this one here. So this code here was completely sent back by the model. And what was quite interesting, actually, the different models give you very different looking code. So I found that certain models give you very function-structured code that gets reused, and some of the models are very procedural, which was quite interesting. But
So that code there is stuff that it's received back?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so it calls the logic app, and in fact we should be able to see that. So if we go up here, so we should be calling this processor logic app here. So yeah, 6:16, a couple of minutes ago. So I've got a bit here where I've got like a switch statement depending on which model you want. So I think the model it probably called would be this one. So it's calling the Azure OpenAI model. And that actually calls a child workflow, which which is this one here, I think. So in this case, I'm just basically calling it over HTTP, and you'll see. So this was my.
Do you mind zooming in a bit?
Yeah. Give me just a second. So this would have been my system prompt where I'm telling it what I want you to do, and then the user prompt would have been whatever I typed in the game. And then the thing that came back would have been this bit down here, and you'll see if we scroll down, that's all the code here, and we just dump that back in the game, and then I've basically dynamically executed in Minecraft. So, like, what's really interesting for me is I've done Minecraft clubs at schools before, and it's mint. You get like 30 kids, and they're so excited because they get out a lesson to play Minecraft, and you know, they'll go and build the most amazing stuff, and especially if you play the education one where they're all on the same game together and they're going and like working in teams. But when I look at this and the kids are like doing Scratch and learning bits and bobs, and it's like, well, actually, if you can just, you know, level up what the kid's thinking about, because instead of thinking, how do I build a little house by writing a bit of code, he can then program his army of bots to go and build him a city. And I think that's the thing for me that what I'd really love to see is Microsoft put something like this in the game, because it would just make it so much bigger what kids could do with it, you know. But it's pretty cool, that, isn't it? That's how easy it was. Just a few shapes, call the model, get it back in the game, and then there you go. Okay, so that, you know, for me, the key point is if I can legacy modernize 10-year-old version of Minecraft written in, I think it's Lao code, I can't even remember how you pronounce it, but if you can do that, there's no reason you can't legacy modernize your .NET app to call an API and shove some AI in it, which I think is really, you know, that's the powerful bit. This is really the architecture of what that looks like. So I happen to make it call Azure API management just because I like putting APIs in there. Logic App sits behind it, does the integration piece, loads it into my game, and there you go. Now, that was a couple of years ago. I kind of built that first demo there, and I've played around with it for a while. But there's a lot been happening in the Logic App space recently, and this is really the bits I want to talk about, because that way was a bit kind of, not old school, but it was like very much use the HTTP connector. There's now loads more connectors you can use for different stuff, and this is what I kind of really want to get across. So number one, we're going to talk about conversational agents. So there's two concepts in Logic Apps that are kind of important. There's conversational agents, which is things you're going to chat to, and then you have autonomous agents, which are things that you can have a system call and they'll do some stuff in the background. And we're going to look at both of those today. So what we're going to start with, and you'll have to excuse while I jump around screens a little bit here. We're going to go from 0 to agent in like 5 minutes. So I'm going to start by creating a new Logic app, and it'd be really nice if Azure brought that up at the top of the list. That's literally the worst demo gremlin ever. Come on. There we go. Right, so I'm going to do a really cut down version of a YouTube video that I did the other day. So my YouTube video was, can I build an agent in 10 minutes that does something quite cool? So I made an agent that could call APIs that could give me info about Premier League players, so I could say who's the best player at Man United or Newcastle or whoever. And my first choice is, what kind of Logic app do I want to build? So the cool thing that Microsoft have done is workflow service plans, kind of pay per hour. So you're probably looking at a couple of £100 a month probably for that, but multi-tenant is pay per click, and this is where they've added features to the consumption type plans on Logic App, which is really where I can now build AI stuff for like 10 pence, which is really cool. So let's put one in. I'll put one in there. Right, so spinning up our Logic App, and then we go to resource. Right, so what we're going to do here is we've got to build this codeless workflow. So I can't remember what the connector's called now. Tell you what, I'm going to show one I've already built because I can't remember the name of the connector. So right, so the connector I was looking for is actually this one here. When a chat message, I was typing when a message. So what you'd basically do is you put when a chat message is received as your trigger, and the magic thing we use is this thing called Logic App Agent Loop, which is a special shape you put in, and it kind of abstracts all of the details to call the AI agent. And what's even better with this one is Microsoft have kind of put this bit in where you don't even have to spin up a model if you don't want to. So with consumption, I've just chosen this GPT-4 mini global model. So I didn't need to create a model, I didn't need to create an AI foundry or a connector, I just chose that from the list. And then what I've done here is I've given it some instructions. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to interact with Octopus Energy, and we're going to build an agent that can tell me how good or bad I am at using electricity and gas. So in this agent loop, the magic is these things here called tools. So what I've done is I've created a tool that can call the Octopus Energy API and get my details. So here, this one basically calls the API with this connector at the top here, and I've given it like my key and stuff like that. And what'll happen is I'm going to chat to this Logic App, and it'll basically, when it detects that I ask it a prompt that makes it think I need to go and get your energy usage, it'll use the tool that it thinks is appropriate, and then it's going to pass the dates in, and then it'll go and get the energy and it'll format the response. So I've really just built this little bit here, but what I can do in Logic Apps is I can actually click the chat button, and that's going to basically spin up my workflow here. We'll start a new chat, and I can now go and ask it about my energy usage. I'm going to show you a little bug that Microsoft sometimes have, because it doesn't actually know what yesterday is sometimes, and we'll see if that happens. So so how much gas did I use yesterday now? I've had it come up with a couple of weird dates before, like that there, look. So if you notice, we'll see if we can go up. For some reason, it thinks yesterday was the 19th of October 2023. I don't know where it gets that from. And I've ended up having an argument with it where it's like, it'll go, I'll say, are you sure that's yesterday? And it'll go, yeah. And I'll go, can you go and get it for this date? And it'll get it fine. But for some reason, every time I put yesterday, it seems to think I've had June as well before. So it's a bit weird. But you'll see here I've got my summary of my usage. I've got the usage by hour, and then it'll give me some interpretation, and I can do things like can you peak hours, something like that. So we'll let it go and do its thing here. So there's the top hours. So it's really just used the same API to get that data and just given it more, a more specific answer to my question. Now, behind the scenes, what really is going on here is if we we look at this logic app, you'll see these are the runs that are running. So I think we just refresh that. There should be a new one. So this is what's running behind the scenes, and you can see, if I just shrink this down a bit, you can see you've got the shapes running, and you'll be able to kind of troubleshoot when these are executing and stuff. And you can go over here and you'll get a bit of detail about what actual calls it made. So they're the results from the API coming back in that little box here. And then I can actually, in the diagnostics here, I can see the chat interaction the users had with the agent here, which is quite cool. So it's actually quite easy to troubleshoot this as well, which is really nice. You know, if you think, you know, we were talking before, Stephen, about functions. So one of the problems with functions, when it doesn't work, you're not going to get any of this like run history to help you troubleshoot what's gone wrong. So hopefully what I want to get across here from a conversational perspective, for things like prototyping, that's a brilliant way to just go from zero to something quite useful that you can show people. Now, if we...
Can I ask you a quick question about
Yeah, go for it.
So that's all embedded in the logic app resource then, it's not really in the AI Foundry or AI search resource behind the scenes?
In my case, you're right, but you can do it with an AI Foundry as well. It really just depends. I think like if you do Logic App Standard, there's a few more advanced scenarios. Logic App Consumption have just brought that out, and I think they're doing just the kind of, we'll hide the model for you to make it easier, which is for me perfect for a demo. But yeah, you don't need all that stuff to deal with, do you, until you need it? Yeah. So this is really the architecture here. So we've got me as a developer writing the, you know, not even writing the code, drawing a picture. Logic Apps is abstracting that model. We talk to Octopus. Really simple architecture, but that's quite useful, you know. Now, what we want to do next is we want to go, right, can we integrate Logic Apps with Copilot? Because my business users aren't going to use Azure Portal to chat to a Logic app that's outside of their ecosystem. So we need to take it a bit further. And the answer is yes, we can do this, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way. So what I'm going to do, and the solution for this is built slightly different to before. There's a really important bit about this, actually, that I'll talk about after I've shown you how this works. So what I'm going to do here is I've got this thing called Octopus Energy Logic Apps Standard. So it's the different flavor of Logic Apps I'm using here. And what I've done is I've actually got two workflows. So if you ignore the top one for a minute, we're really looking at the bottom two. And what I'm doing here is these Logic Apps are going to be exposed as MCP servers. So the bit that's quite cool is before the model was kind of called directly by the Logic app. What I'm actually going to do now is, because I'm using Copilot, it's already got the model. So I don't need to do that myself. I just need to give it the functions that it'll use in the model. So slightly different architecture here. So this is why I've got two Logic apps. This one's really noddy, where it just does the get electricity. And I've got another one that just does get gas. Now I have to do two things to make this work with Copilot. So the first one is I need to sort authentication out. So what I've done is that you can use this thing called EasyAuth in. So a Logic App Standard really sits on top of an app service, and you can use the EasyAuth settings of the app service, where you can kind of integrate it into Entra ID. So if you're in Copilot, well, already logged in with Entra, so we can actually flow credentials through and validate access to the workflow and stuff. So again, you know, this is quite a powerful security scenario, but we're really abstracting the complexity. And I just need to tick a few boxes and put the right values in, and then we're up and running, and I can control who can access this. So I've set up my EasyAuth. Sorry, do you want to? And the other setting I had to do, I think in the interest of time, I'll skip this bit, but you have to go into the dev tools, and in the host.json, you need to put a setting that enables MCP server. Now, if you're building Logic App Standard in VS Code, that's fine. You're going to deploy host.json. If you're doing it in the portal, you need to do that step in the dev tools to turn that on. What that means though is now in Copilot, so I'm over in Copilot Studio, I've got my Octopus Energy agent here. And in this agent, I can make quite a powerful scenario, because what I can do is I can do things like give my agent knowledge. So if I remember right, I think in here, I've given it the link to a few Octopus Energy URLs with like the tariff details and stuff like that on it. And then in the tools section, this is where I've registered my Logic app as an MCP server. So what I did was you can go into here, you do new tool, MCP, and then you basically go through this wizard. And you can give it some details about the URL. You use an auth to authentication. So in a few minutes, you've got this set up. There's a guy called Kent Weir off the product team. If you're going to do this, I'd probably recommend watching his YouTube video about setting this up, because he does a really good walkthrough of how to do it. But for me, if you think here, right, I've gone and created my agent in Copilot. I've given it access to my Logic app. I've given it some other stuff, and then I just publish it. So over here, we've now gone from the developer ecosystem. I'm now a business user. And I can go, hi, it's Mike. Can you tell me now? I think pretty much Copilot doesn't get the date wrong every time I've tested it, which is interesting. I'm not sure like what flavor of the model it is, but you see it straight away. It's right here. So that's interesting. How it's interpreted my question was it thinks I just want an overview, probably a good guess. So I can say, here's my peak usage periods. It's offering me a chart. So I'm really here I'm leveraging all the power of what Copilot has in it, so it can do all the fancy stuff Copilot does. But I've just plugged in some API/workflows to give it the power. So I could plug in anything here. Really, I know I could give it a give it a workflow that might send an email. So I could make it, if I told it, or send me a summary, it could probably send me an email summarizing that chart or something. And really for me, once you've got this workflow that can, your Copilot can see your workflows, really, it's kind of just what can you think of that you could make it do, because all the plumbing's in place. You can just keep giving it more power, which I think is really cool. What's people's thoughts on that use case? Anyone got any thoughts on that?
Just the guardrails for it, because you can get it a lot of power. So, I've got my Claude connected up to lots of things. On my machine, I'm like, if I don't switch them off, and there wasn't any proper guardrails, then it could be dangerous.
So I think that's a brilliant question. So there's a couple of key things here, right? So the first thing is this agent's inside your Office 365, Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So it's going to inherit all the guardrails you're putting in your tenant anyway. And all the features Copilot's going to give, you're going to have access to them. So that's a huge tick for me. And especially, for me, there's like AI tools everywhere. This is definitely way better than having your business users go and using some third-party vendor from God knows where, doing God knows what behind the scenes you've got no visibility of. The second thing, so I'm going to come on to this slightly right in the last slide, but one of the things Microsoft has done is when I've enabled the AI features in Logic apps, your Logic app will actually surface through the governance model they're putting into Foundry, so it'll be aware of it as being an agent. So it's going to fall in both ends into the governance patterns Microsoft are building to help you do that. So I think they're two good ticks for me that you're always going to have the risk people are going to be building agents, but you're kind of mitigating it by fitting it into the pattern where you're going to be managing these agents anyway. Okay, so let's have another use case here. Right, actually this is the diagram of what we did, which I think is quite cool. So we've got let's pretend it's a real business scenario here. Account manager at Octopus Energy. chatting with Copilot, she can go and ask about one of her business customers' usage. You know, what's Acme using yesterday? The MCP plugs in. Now, the bit that's really interesting, if you remember from the previous diagram, the model call was kind of over here. And if you notice, the model's actually moved over here. So again, the model's abstracted from us because Copilot interacts with the model magically behind the scenes. But what Copilot's doing is, through the MCP usage, it's telling the model, by the way, the user said this, you've got these tools available that you can call, and the model can basically make the calls to the logic apps, leveraging all the easy auth authentication, and just call, you know, it needs gas, so it goes and gets it. If it doesn't need either of them, it'll just reply without calling the logic app, which I think is quite powerful. Okay, now we're going to look at an autonomous agent. So this is the question you had for me earlier, Stephen. Now, what we're going to do here is, not every AI use case is going to involve a user chatting. You know, there are good use cases there, but there's other places you can do AI. And what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to open a couple of browser tabs first, I think. And I'm going to open my email, but you're all going to pretend you can't see my email for a second. Right, so we've got this logic app here. This logic app, which is an autonomous workflow. So what this is going to do that's different, it's not going to trigger from me sending a message. So if you notice the first shape here, when a blob's added or modified. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take my Octopus Energy PDF bill and we're going to do some magic with it. So this will trigger, get the content of the blob, and then this blue action down here, we're going to call the AI Document Intelligence Service. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the content of the blob, and I've got this pre-built model. So the great thing about document intelligence, it comes with some pre-built models for certain types of document. And for demo purposes, an invoice is brilliant because there's an invoice model, so I can just use it and I don't have to build my own model. And it'll basically get the details out from my invoice. But then I don't want to I could take that JSON, which is probably going to be a big JSON, do stuff with it, but I'm actually going to use an agent loop to interpret that bill. And I'm going to, like we did before, I'm going to give it the same tools to get my energy, get my gas, and then at the end, I'm going to use the Azure Communication Services to have it send me an email and interpret my bill for me. So what we're going to do is, somewhere in here, there's a storage account. This one here. And I'm going to upload the latest copy of my bill, which happens to have opened in the right folder, which is good. So I'm going to overwrite that. And that basically has just uploaded a new copy of my bill. Now, within a minute or so, this should kick off a new workflow. Now it's not immediate, so we'll just bear with that for a second, and I'll go and open my email while we're looking for this. I wonder if I can just force it. Let me see. There we go, so let's see what that is. Right, so here you'll see we've got the blob trigger. We then go and get the content of the blob from here, so you can see we've got this big, PDF encoded string here. I'm going to call the document intelligence. So I'm passing in the blob from the PDF here, and we're going to get out this information here. Now, as it happens, this is the thing I was saying to you before, Stephen, was if you look at the data it comes out, it's kind of parsing out the data from the PDF, and then if you go further down, see there's quite a big nasty JSON here. It's like pulling out certain bits of the PDF that it thinks are important. It kind of tells you where they are and that kind of thing. And this is where that JSON gets really quite complex. So if I want to do something with it, like transform it, then call an API, it might be quite awkward to do that. But for me, you know, it will be doable. It's probably just going to be a bit of work. But for me, what I can do is I can just call the agent, and I can give it some instructions here and say, you know, you're gonna help me understand what's going on with this bill, and then it's going to pass in. This is basically the JSON that came back from the AI document intelligence that parsed the PDF, and then the model's going to give me back something interpreting that. But it may choose to call the tools as well if it thinks it needs them, and then it'll send my email at the end. So hopefully we saw that go right through. There we go. And then magically in my email I get my little summary email here, you know, it says in this billing period you've spent, you know, so this bit here, this estimate, I'm not actually sure if that comes from the bill itself or if it came from the AI. It could have been either. We get the summary of our charges, summary of gas. The suggestions bit down the bottom is definitely from the AI model. So it's, you know, looking at my usage, I probably called the tools and said, on certain days. And actually, one of the things that's interesting about them tools, the AI model can pick and choose the date range it wants to look at. So when we were chatting before, we were saying yesterday, but when it does the bill, it might say, give me it for the full month. And then it might, you know, it can dynamically do that because I'm just saying, you tell me the date range you want this for and I'll go and get you the data, which I think is really cool. You know, that demo, you know, you're talking like an hour, 2 hours to do a demo like that, which is quite, again, pretty powerful. You can go and show a potential business product owner who's after some ideas of what you could do with AI. You know, that's something quite powerful to show them, and it's just a case of what's the idea for you guys back at the office. How can you adapt some of these demos to show something useful? Okay, now
a little question on that one. You know, like you're saying, it pushes out that kind of very complicated JSON.
Yeah.
And you could call them the tool set there. Could you have the tool set call it to create a more structured, simpler JSON that you want?
Well, you can do that.
You clean up for
yeah, you could do.
You
could do this in two ways. So this is the cool bit. With Logic Apps, you could do a map where you can write code that'll do the transform.
Yeah.
You could even get AI to help you write the code to do the transform. But the other thing you could have done is, where I said to the OpenAI, give me this as a nice HTML email, I could have said, give me this as a JSON output. By the way, here's a JSON schema. I've done that pattern before with, it was a few years ago when people first started using ChatGPT, we were mucking around with ideas. We were doing it with like EDI messages and HL7v2 messages. Can we get the AI to transform the data for us? Which was actually, it's quite powerful how it can do that. So it might make your idea loads easier. Even if it's just for prototype, prove that it works. And then you know, you can decide which way you want to do it later. But this is basically what that looked like. So we had, you know, let's imagine Octopus send B2B messages to partners. So they send the PDF. You could maybe use Azure storage with SFTP if you're the partner receiving it. And then when that file comes in, it triggers my Logic app. You know, every couple of minutes it probably triggers it. I used the model, I think on the diagram I've missed the icon for the document intelligence, but it calls the APIs where it needs it, and then it sends the customer that summarized email. I'm sure there's loads of ways people could use just patterns like that for all of that content you get where you just want to know, give me a summary, I can't be bothered with all the details. Okay, so for me, I'm going to talk a little bit about the stuff we've been doing. So what I was doing here was, as a product owner, I'm looking for ideas of how I can put AI in my product. And for me, the thing Logic App really helped with is I could do rapid prototyping that could become a real thing quite easily. So when I first started mucking around with this, I did my first little agent. I was like, oh, that's quite cool. And then what I was doing is I was talking to customers and listening to the questions they're asking that they struggle with. So as a FinOps vendor, I have customers going, I don't understand this about my Azure bill. I don't understand how this resource is configured. Why is this costing me so much money? These are all agents that we can build. So one of the quite interesting ones, that little diagram on the left, I built 2 agents on a plane over the Atlantic to California that are now, one of them's already in the product and one of them goes live next week. And that's like a month after I was actually there, which is quite cool. And it was quite cool as well when I'm sitting at the this event, and I got asked to join one of these expert panel things where they'll ask you. And I'm sat on this list, and everybody's talking. Sorry, I'm forgetting the cameras are on, so I'll calm my language. Everyone's talking about agents and how great they are, and you can hear everybody's talking like theoretical, and I'm sitting going, guys, I've been sat outside on the booth while you've been all in at other sessions. I've built 2 agents this morning while I was sat in the booth while you guys were watching a SharePoint session or something like that. That's the speed you can rapidly build these agents in prototype. Now I then chuck them over to my engineering team and they'll build them for real. But I want to give you just a really quick one just to show you that I'm not talking rubbish here, what we actually did. So this is our kind of FinOps product here. And I've got this kind of recommendations on Azure resources that can be over provisioned, so they're spending too much money. And what we did was we've got this thing called single view of a resource where it lets you see what's going on with a particular resource. And the idea is to simplify the view in Azure so you can know where your money's going. And what we did here is we put this agent beta in. Now, a little bit earlier, I was telling a few people about that. There are some dangers around building AI solutions. One of our other teams, not this team, but a different team, accidentally spent quite a lot of money by making a mistake on Azure. That is totally doable if you don't do things in the right way. I was very cautious when we first go live with AI about if I had that chat experience, right? The Copilot's a bit different because Microsoft are giving you like a fixed fee for Copilot for a lot of the licenses, but when you're using the Azure stuff, every time somebody chats something in the thing, that costs me pennies every time. And if they, write 100 words, it costs me more than 1 word kind of idea. So we want to be really cautious about how we introduce these features. So we decided, right, we're going to put a big button in here to get a summary of this resource, and if I put the big button in, it means I don't have the risk of users typing stuff, because I don't want them asking the AI questions unrelated to what we're actually about. So I don't want them going, what was the weather today? Because that's costing me money for them to ask that. So for now, we're going to control this. Later on, we'll probably put more in where you can... let me just change that to light mode because it's not showing up properly on the screen there. Just a second. Come on, Wi-Fi. Right. Do that again. So I want to really, when we first introduce this, I want to really control what users can do till we get comfortable with how we're going to manage it. But that button, basically, we do exactly the same as what the Logic apps do. Behind the scenes, we're calling APIs to understand what the Azure resource is doing, and then we'll present it back in a user-friendly manner. So here you can see, this VM scale set. Here's the details at the top. Here's the cost of it. We've got some summaries of performance usage and observations about it. And then we can, so we're feeding the agent data, but also we're telling the agent through the instructions things like, so it's come up with a list of recommendations here, but it'll also give you guidance on things you might do wrong, because it knows just from the stuff it's been trained on, it knows about common developer mistakes and that kind of thing. So it can actually give you really powerful info. And the idea here is I get all these users who come in and they'll look at a resource and go, I don't really understand this resource, or I need justification for a decision. I need some backup, and the agent's going to do that. So that's been really powerful for us. But then what we did is from the agent I built on a plane that went live 30 days later, the next release, you'll notice over here, so this is my QA environment I'm showing you here, so kind of just bear with me if it blows up for a minute. But let's say we've got this SQL here. So you'll notice we've now started plugging other agents in. So we're doing things like, what if I want to change this to a data center? From East US 2 to West US 2, what's the difference going to mean? It's not just cost, it's like, what does that mean from a practicality of doing it? What if I want to move this VM from Intel to AMD? Will that save me money? And all these questions that the customers have asked us, we're building agents for them, and that's how we're AI empowering our product. And that's the thing that I think my takeaway would hopefully be is listen for what people are asking, understand the prototyping technology so you can validate all your assumptions, and then there's your AI ideas that your business can transform with. And then if we do, sorry guys, I think I'm just slightly over, but I've got 2 bits left, I think. So what we really did, I think this is a good diagram where there's different technologies you can use with AI. So we've got our model at the bottom, and then there's 2 client libraries. So you've got semantic kernel that people have been using for quite a while, but they've brought out a new one called, I think it's OpenAI Client. And what's really happening is, in my prototyping I've shown you here, I'm using a logic app that basically encapsulates that under the hood and gives you like a drag and drop experience. But if you're comfortable in Azure Functions, they have bindings in Azure Functions that'll abstract that, talk to the same model. But if you're building an app, and this is what we did, we prototyped over here, because I don't have logic apps in the architecture of our app, I didn't want to change that. We just used the code directly ourselves. So we built code, we put plugins in it, we used that framework, and it's all exactly the same, it's just different abstraction levels. So what to look for then? So there's been loads happening with the teams. I've talked more about logic apps today, but API management and functions are definitely in this integration space, so they also have AI features. From a logic app perspective, so there's all these connectors, some of which I've shown you today, make all the AI use cases easier. The agent loop is the really important bit, so that again, that'll make it easy to implement an agent. Well, everybody's hearing about MCP, but it's what does that actually mean? How do I actually implement it? From a logic app perspective, it's especially in standard, flip a switch, it enables it as an MCP server. Then I plugged it into Copilot. Dead easy. You can plug it into VS Code if you're doing them there as well. New things from Ignite. So agent loop and logic app consumption is brilliant if you're prototyping or you're just learning, because my demos I've shown you before, most of them have cost like pennies to run. I think everything I've shown you today has probably cost me, with the exception of the logic app standard bit where you pay per month. But the consumption bit, I bet I haven't spent £1 since I started using it. Logic app connectors as MCP tools. This is really powerful because all those connectors that I'm showing you in the visualization of the workflow, they're enabling you to use them directly from Foundry itself. So if you're building an agent in Foundry and you want to be able to leverage calling out to something, you can just use those same connectors, which is really cool. We mentioned about the control plane. So this is the bit you were asking about before, Stephen, about the governance. So your logic app agents will show up in Foundry alongside your Foundry agents. If you have concerns about all these API stuff going under the hood, you definitely want to be looking at API management, but it's much more of a premium service. So when you're just getting started, you may not use it so much, but definitely when you get further in, you're going to want some of the enterprise features that might offer for things like token policies and things like, you've used too many tokens in the last hour, we're going to throttle you. that kind of thing you'll get in API management. You can also, what's quite cool is with API management, you can take an existing API you've got and kind of MCP enable it. So you could plug it into Copilot as an MCP server if you wanted to, which is quite cool, and you're just proxying your APIs, and API management will take care of that protocol translation for you. Thank you for bearing with me there. I hope everybody got something useful out of that. Any questions, feel free to shout up or shout over pizza. But thank you for listening.